session superintendent search of January 11th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Okay, please stand as Linda Porras leads us in the flag salute. Roll call. The roll call will reflect that all board members are present either in person or virtually. Cabinet members are here as well, except for Superintendent Bailey, who will not be part of these proceedings. Item 4, approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Griffith. Is there a second?
Second, Linda Porras.
Seconded by Linda Porras. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, calls for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Wendy, is that a vote for opposed?
Yeah, no, I voted yes.
Okay, there's a lag. Okay. Any abstentions? None. That motion carries 5-0. Okay, item 5, public comments on open session items. And we have one, communications from the floor. In accordance with bylaws of the board 9323, time is reserved for oral communications by members of the Board of Education or by citizens present. Citizens wishing to be heard on agenda items shall have a 3-minute limit and should indicate their intention at this time. In accordance with the law, decisions of the board cannot be made on any matter not previously published before the board meeting as indicated in bylaws of the board 9323.2. Trina Gonzalez-Alisi.
Good evening, board members and members of the audience. I'm Trina Gonzalez-Alisi. I'm the president of Desert Sands Teachers Association. I'm taking advantage of this opportunity to speak during public comment because I'm not sure how involved the associations are in the decision-making process of a new superintendent. So I wanted to just take this opportunity to maybe share some of the desires that we would maybe want. I would first like to say that it has been an honor and privilege to work with Mr. Bailey for the 4+ years that I've been president. I believe that we have really done a good job of collaboratively bringing our vision and goals together so that we know that that the district and the association is both working for the good of the students. I feel that we've made a lot of progress in that area. I feel that we have a very good working relationship. While I appreciate that he announced his retirement early so that you could begin your search early, it feels like a very slow ripping off of the Band-Aid. This is going to be a long several months, but I really appreciate him and the work that we've been able to do together. On Saturday, there was a meeting of a region in CTA called San Gorgonio Service Center, and there were a number of union leaders in that meeting, and we were able to compare what's going on in different districts. We also had Riverside County Coalition of Presidents meeting yesterday, so just for Riverside County, and then today just the Low Desert. And we were talking about, because there are more than one district that is looking for a superintendent at this time. And so we were sharing what are some of the ideals that we would look for in a superintendent. And I think there are 3 main ones that come to mind for sure to have a good working relationship with the association. And that is constant, clear communication, regular communication, transparency, and honesty. And those are qualities that I have grown to appreciate in Mr. Bailey. I count on those qualities, so I would hope that we would be looking for somebody who would continue in that vein, somebody who gets to know all of the school sites, all of the staff, all of the students, and is a servant leader. Which again, I think that we have really established that kind of working relationship between the association and the district. So again, not knowing how involved the associations may or may not be during this process, I just wanted a chance to share my thoughts on a superintendent search. Thank you.
Thank you. There was only one comment. There were no online comments. So we will move on to item 6.1, study session, superintendent search. I will be handing this item over to Dr. Joe Condon, our consultant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for showing me where the microphone is. So I appreciate that. I wasn't sure I was going to go back to engineering school to figure out how to use this, so thank you. I placed, or Blanche placed at the dais an updated memo from me to the board. There are 3 items that I indicated at the bottom in red: board visit, calendar of events, and interview questions, so I'll address those. I failed to do that earlier. My purpose tonight is to ask you questions, generate dialogue, so that I have a sense of how the board wants this conducted. Congratulations to the board. I've had April meetings, and this is January, so it gives a great timeline, and thank you very much. It makes my work a heck of a lot easier. As you know, we did the search last time when Scott Bailey became the superintendent, and so the process is quite similar. Some of you were on the board, some of you were not on the board, so I'll kind of walk through that tonight. But essentially, I'll work with the board. I'll update you either each Friday or every other Friday as to the progress. There's a period of time when we're advertising the job that's kind of, it feels slow, but a lot's going on behind the scenes. Candidates are getting their paperwork done. I've already had a couple of calls from people about this position, so just to let you know that. The depth of the process is really determined by the board. So I facilitate the board's search for the superintendent. And so if you want to, for instance, involve the union, I'll be happy to meet with the union. If you want to survey the parents, if you want to survey the staff, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But you have about 20 items here that I'd like to go through and get a sense of what the board is looking for, because that gives me my direction, my marching orders, if you will. Is that comfortable so far? So the very first one is, does the board only want to consider a candidate who is currently a superintendent? Standard question that I would ask you. And I'll let the board talk about it amongst yourselves or talk with me, whichever is more comfortable. But do you want us to only consider candidates who are currently a superintendent in another school district?
Okay, Mr. Griffith?
I don't think we need to narrow our search. Always in the past, it seems like we either get width or depth. And so we typically, in the past, I believe, we'll either get a superintendent from a small district that maybe has, a couple of elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school, so they'll have the depth, but they're a superintendent looking to go to a bigger district. Or we'll find a assistant superintendent at a big school that has a lot of, that's used to dealing with 60 or 70,000 students, but doesn't have the width. It'll be somebody from personnel or ed services, or one of the other assistant superintendents. So I don't think we need to limit it to superintendents, because I don't think we'll find a candidate at a similarly sized school that will want to just move over to move. We're going to probably get a lot of people that are looking to take the next step up, either with a bigger district that's already a superintendent, or take on more responsibility at a smaller district where they're working for a big district. So I don't think we need to limit it to superintendents. Scott was not a superintendent, but the prior two superintendents were superintendents of smaller districts. So I don't think we limited ourselves. I think in Plus, in this environment, I think there's a lot of openings for superintendents, and if we narrow our focus or the scope of our search, we're not going to get very many candidates that will meet our qualifications.
Ms. Pierce?
Ditto, no. I was totally agreeing. I don't think it should be limited to superintendents only. I think when it gets time to look over the candidates, the size of the district, as he says, and their position in the district, and mine comes down to one of the questions coming up, perhaps if they were on the cabinet and an assistant superintendent, I mean, those are definitely things to consider. So I disagree with limiting also.
Ms. Porras?
I agree. I don't think we should limit it.
Okay.
Ms. Jonathan? Ms. Jonathan?
Yes, I don't think we should be limited. That being said, I would prefer a superintendent. And I agree with what Mr. Griffith said, that we may be limited. But I also think that if we're going to be looking at a candidate, I would like them to have at least been an assistant superintendent. Our district is one of the most revered in California. And quite honestly, in the United States, we have a reputation of excellence in our school district, and we're very innovative. And so I think that I'd want to see only assistant superintendents and superintendents applying. I think that I would be a little apprehensive bringing in someone that was, for example, a principal at a school. So I think that we have to do some kind of parameters, because I really believe that during these times that we want somebody that's experienced, but we also want somebody that's going to be able to have some innovative thoughts, but more importantly, being able to handle things during COVID and during regular times, which is really unique. So I don't want to limit it to just superintendents, but I do think that we have to have a point where we say no, we're looking at somebody that preferably has been an assistant superintendent before taking on the superintendent's position.
Thank you. And I agree with all the reasons people have stated. No, we should not limit ourselves.
Thank you. And the last time you searched, that was not a criteria, so just to let you know. Thank you. Does the board want only to see candidates who have a doctorate? Is that an issue? Some boards it is, and many boards it's not.
Mr. Griffith?
Okay. Anybody else?
No,
Okay. Okay.
Anybody else? No?
Thank you.
no.
Does the board only want to see or consider candidates who have cabinet level experience? You heard about that a minute ago. So somebody who has served already in a cabinet in a school district, but perhaps not a superintendent.
I would say yes. Personally, I think that that's really important, especially with the size of our district and the responsibilities of our school district, that I'd want to see somebody that's been on the cabinet before.
Mr. Griffith?
I can't hear anything.
I would want to consider anybody that applied, maybe a director from an extremely large school district might have the ability to do that, or somebody that checks every box except the cabinet experience, like maybe a consultant, somebody that went outside. I don't think we're going to probably see many applications from non-cabinet members, but if we had one, I wouldn't eliminate them specifically just because they didn't have cabinet experience.
Your size will draw that group, and you will see every completed application, whether we recommend you interview them or not. You will see them, so you never determine that.
Pierce?
I think that the cabinet experience is important. just in the scope of whether it's a small district or a huge one, and somebody's trying to size down at this point in their career, or the other way, trying to size up. But I do think the cabinet level, being in charge of that aspect of a district, is very important to move to the next level.
Porras?
I think it's important, but I kind of refer back to Scott didn't have cabinet experience when we hired him, correct?
He did.
He did.
The title
And
was
he's-
different.
He did,
But he
okay.
had cabinet
Assistant
experience.
Okay.
superintendent.
So,
So,
yeah,
okay.
I think I think it is important then there is that experience of cabinet.
Okay.
And I do think cabinet level experience is important.
When I screen candidates, are you looking for candidates who's in a district currently of the same size as Desert Sands? Is that an issue? Or are you looking at somebody to move up or move down? But
Mr. Griffith?
I wouldn't limit it to similar sized districts. I would take like I said, a superintendent from a smaller district that's going to go up.
Ms. Pierce?
I agree. I stated that in my prior example of somebody who may want to size down or size up. It doesn't have to be the same size students that we have.
okay.
Porras?
Okay. So
Ms.
that's
Jonathan?
If they're from a smaller school district, again, they could be bringing something new to our district that we wouldn't necessarily consider. So I think that that's important. Any kind of cabinet experience is really important because they understand the workings of a cabinet and the superintendent's position. So again, that's important. I don't mind whether they're from a smaller district or not.
Okay, so the consensus of the board is that's
Yes.
not a criteria.
Yes.
Does the board want to consider applicants from outside of California? Now, those of you who were not on the board at the time, when Scott came in, California now limits, for STRS purposes, limits the contributions on salary to about $150,000. I don't have the exact number. And that was a problem, recruiting Scott at the time. So, Don, I know you were on the board at the time. You may remember that. So is inside or outside of California a criteria for the board?
To me, it's not. And the thing with Scott is when he came on, that law was just coming
That's
into
correct.
effect.
Yes.
So I think anybody that would apply from out of state now that's not gonna catch somebody flat-footed.
I think you're right.
And so I think anybody that applies is gonna know that because it's pretty much any state employee starting out. Even like a 21-year-old kid going to work for a city, he's limited to
Actually,
that.
I believe it's superintendents only, but I'm not, I can check on that.
There was a law that affected a lot of public employees.
That's correct.
Because when they had the STRS and the PERS crisis, they needed to bring down, it used to be 3%, then it's gone down, and they've always tightened those parameters. So those are things I think we're going to be, in effect, continuing as salaries get bigger. I think the percentages are going to get smaller. And so anybody coming in, that the 140 that I know affects superintendents, that's what it started off as. And there's also a COLA adjustment to that, or some kind of an adjustment based on the economy. So they know that's going up. And so I just think as long as they're aware, but it's as far as making a special circumstance and going outside to keep somebody, I mean, we need to be upfront with them that, hey, if you're going to come in, this is where you're coming in.
And any applicant, we would inform them of that as well.
Yes.
That, as you said, caught everybody flat-footed. So, anybody else have a thought on that?
I'll just go ahead and just ask individually. Ms. Porras? Or Ms. Pierce?
No, I don't think to limit just inside California. If the candidate is well informed about what the parameters are coming here and they want to move to California, and, I think that should be open, especially if there may be a shortage of superintendents out there, just like there's a shortage of many things.
Porras? And Ms. Jonathan?
I've been fortunate enough to be on the school board for 10 years now, and I've seen us go through 2 superintendents. Actually, I was there when Ms. McGehee was our superintendent, and then Rutherford, and then Scott Bailey. I will say during the search with both for Rutherford and for Mr. Bailey, we had people from outside California. And if they're willing to make the adjustment, that's fine with me. I do think that we should not limit it to just California. I'd like to, if someone's interested from another state, I'd love to see what they would be willing to bring to the table as far as being a superintendent in our district.
Okay, and Ms. Jonathan, can you mute when you're not speaking? We're getting a feedback from you.
I'm going to mute now, but there's no noise in the house, but that's okay.
Yeah, all right, thank you. And that's fine, outside California.
Okay, thank you. Is a candidate with principal experience at elementary, middle, or high school
Yes.
a criteria?
Mr. Griffith?
Nope.
Ms. Pierce?
I think having some principal experience as far as working up the leadership ladder, in my opinion, might be helpful at least in one or two grade level areas.
Okay, Ms. Porras?
I don't think we should limit it because this says, do we only want to interview candidates with principal experience? So I don't want to limit it to that.
Okay, Ms. Jonathan?
I think that if we're able to get somebody with experience, kudos, because as a superintendent, I think that it's a good way to relate to all the staff and really truly understand the workings of schools, specifically elementary, middle, and high school. But when we come down to determining what candidates we want to choose for the final interviews, I think that we'll be able to see who steps up to the plate and has what we are looking for. So I'm not going to limit it, but what I would say that would be an important thing in my mind.
Okay, and conceivably, I would want somebody who's been a teacher and a principal.
So what I hear you saying is don't limit the applicant pool, and then you make that decision when you review the application.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, I'm fine with that. Thank you. Do you prefer candidates who are bilingual?
Okay, Mr. Griffith?
Well, yes. However, I don't think, I think, when we get down to, like the last 3 or 4, if there's a tie and somebody's bilingual, then yeah, that's a great thing to have. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to not consider our prospective superintendents that aren't bilingual just because they're not bilingual.
So you're saying you'd use that as a screening?
I don't want to use it as a screening. I want it, like when we get down to the top 2 or 3, if we have a bilingual candidate, that would be great. I mean, I would love to have a bilingual superintendent, but I'm not going to say I'm only going to have a bilingual superintendent.
All things being equal, if they are, that's great. If they're not, that's okay. Is that,
Right.
am I
That's
putting?
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
I agree with what you just said, all things being said.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, Ms. Jonathan?
Again, it's a plus if they're bilingual, but it's not going to be a deal breaker for me if they're not. If they seem like they tick off all the boxes, and as Mr. Griffith said, if we're down to the nitty gritty, if someone's bilingual and they're tied, I'm going to go for the bilingual person.
Okay, thank you. Assuming this person is at a cabinet level, so that's an assumption, do you have a preference for educational services, for business services, for special ed? What background are you looking for, if any, in your criteria?
Mr. Griffith?
It doesn't really matter where they come from. Because, I mean, I look at some of the cabinet we've had in the past. I mean, we've had a lot of assistant superintendents that were principals and high school principals. And so the fact that they get to that principal level and then they either go into HR or ed services or something, I mean, it's a mutual pathways to the top. And so I wouldn't limit it because I doubt, or I would say the probability of getting somebody, as a superintendent that hasn't been a teacher, been a principal, been an assistant superintendent, And then if you go to a small district, we have 4 assistant superintendents, some only have 2. So they have a lot of overlap, and you get to the really large ones, and they'll have 5, 6, and so it just, the thinness of the job description of the assistant superintendent doesn't concern me if they're applying for superintendent.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Pierce?
No, I don't think it matters which area they come from, because I think at that point, the person has shown their leadership capabilities and their capability to take on more. And so I don't think it matters which category they come from or where their specialty is, because they could be
Right.
broad-based then.
Okay.
Porras?
Okay.
Ms. Jonathan?
I agree with a lot with what Ms. Pierce said, and ultimately I have assistant superintendents that in our district that I feel strongly and confident about. Our superintendent is supposed to oversee them. He doesn't need to micromanage and walk into their shoes and work their positions. So as long as they have some kind of a superintendent position prior to coming into our position, that's fine with me, because as I said, I have great business services, HR, student services, so I'm not asking them to take on those roles.
Okay, same.
That's fine. Some boards, if you're in financial straits, they want somebody with a business background. So I understand.
Okay.
The next 2 questions I'm going to ask you, but I don't want an answer. This is a kind of a closed session item, but if there are candidates that you want me specifically to consider or to contact, either inside or outside the school district, please email me. Blanche has my email, and we'll set that up. So I just want you to think about that and let me know if that exists.
Okay.
I will develop a draft calendar, and I'll work with Blanche and look at your calendar dates and parcel out certain dates. Most of the work that we'll do from now on is in closed session. So I'll give you copies of all the applicants. We'll review them. I'll give you my recommendations for whom you should interview. We'll work on interview questions, and that's one of the things I want to talk to you about tonight. Begin to think about areas that you would like to consider for interviews. I'll draft a question, send it back to you, make sure that question meets your needs. So just look at that. But I'll work that out with Blanche. The next 2 questions really deal with community input. If the board wants me to put together a survey of teachers, a survey of non-teaching staff, a survey of administrative staff, a survey of parents, what are your thoughts on that? I can do that or not do that depending on the board. Some boards do, some boards don't.
Okay, Mr. Griffith?
Impactful, which is hard. I think those are important things to do to get the community involvement, but just based on your experience and what I've done in the last 2, I could probably predict what 80% of this stuff is going to say. We want a strong, curriculum that's a people person, and so I think we need to do that. But I just don't see sometimes that the input is really going to change our direction or our scope for it. I think we need to do it. So I think we need to do the outreach for it, but I probably almost everybody in here could predict what 90%, 80% of it's going to say.
I have to say, in the 35 searches I've done, I've never had a board look back at that and change their criteria. But it's input that the community gets to give that causes the board to think about it and talk about it. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
It's a focus point, so
Correct.
More or less.
Ms. Pierce?
I agree. I think that we should do that outreach to the, wait a minute, there's a new name for it. Instead of stakeholders, it's educational partners. I read your thing. Educational partners, teachers, non-teachers, everybody involved. And I think it's good for us to read over and take that in the back of our minds as we're looking over everything in the search. So yes, I would like to see that.
Okay. Ms. Porras?
Yeah, I think it's important that we get our community involved. That's they're part of everything. So yeah, our community and our staff, because that's going to affect them. I also want to say that when if we do when we come down to the point where we're going to make the choice, I think it's important that we also go to wherever that person's at and we interview their staff and their community and just really get a feel for what that person's like to work with. And you know, that's a whole other thing, but when we get to that point.
Well, that's something that I added, and just so you know, if 3 or more board members visit the candidate's school or district, it's a board meeting. If 2 of you visit the school, it's not a board meeting.
Right.
And those 2 report back.
Right.
So I will ask you as we move through the process, if you want to visit the candidate's current employer and who would like to visit, because you have to post that as a meeting. So that, thank you.
Okay,
You took care of one of my items.
Okay. Ms. Jonathan?
And thank you, Linda Porras, for saying that. I think that it's very important, and I would prefer to have all of us there if possible to talk to the people that actually work with our candidates that we're considering. That being said, I think that it's now, you know what, I just lost my frame of thought. So can you repeat what you were?
Community
I'm like
and staff
listening to
involvement.
Linda and I forgot what I was saying.
About community and staff involvement.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that transparency is important. Extremely important, and even more so in today's time. And I think it's important that everybody shares what they're looking for in a candidate. We did that when we went and we did that when we did our search for Scott. And I think it's important to do that again because I think that each one of our groups, each one of our stakeholders, or whatever you want to call them, I think that they have a voice and that they'll share their concerns. Ultimately, it's our decision as a board, but I do think it's important to hear what they have to say and take that into consideration.
I feel the same way.
Okay, thank you. I'll put the timeline together with Blanche. I'll send it to you. It will be a draft, so certainly amend it as you wish to. We will fingerprint your final candidate, so it's a financial check, a criminal check, a graduate record check. So if somebody says they have a doctorate, they really have a doctorate, you know, that kind of thing. So I just want you to know that. And begin to think about where we might have the interviews. Ideally, not on this campus. If they're during the week, usually they're not, but if they're during the week, it's obviously a public event. So begin to think about where we might have that, and you know better than I where that might be, and we'll change that. And do I have your authorization to contact your legal counsel to begin to draft a contract?
Yes.
Because I want to get that early on and not at the last minute. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Thank you. And then I'll ask you, and I'll send out a note, but I'll ask you what areas you would like to query. I have a bank of probably, I don't know, 150 or 200 questions that other districts have used. And so areas that you'd like to question, I'll begin to draft those interviews, and I'll try and get that done early. So by the time the interviews are done, you're ready to go. So I just want you to know that. My services will be billed through your law firm. I work for Educational Support Services. We're a subset of your law firm. We are legally separate from that firm, but I want you to know that, so I'll keep track of my time on that. I have gathered from the county current salaries for superintendents. So I'll look what districts match yours in an approximate size. You know, if there's a 3,000 student district, you're probably not going to compare that, but I'll give that to you. And so we'll begin to talk about compensation for the superintendent. I'm done. How's that? What have I not included that you wish I had, or what have you not had time to talk about that you'd like to give me as far as information?
Okay, let me see, Mr. Griffith?
Well, So last time, as a board, we made the decision to intentionally look for technology.
Correct.
And so I think if we are going to, like, we could focus on STEAM or STEM. We could focus on bilingual education. There's a lot of things for us to focus on, but last time we said we were going to go after technology. We went after technology and we got technology. And, from CSBA, you can see we excel at technology. So if the board wants to focus, I think it's on us in the next week to work with Joe to see if we want to say our emphasis is going to be somewhere. Because I think it paid off for us. I mean, I think we did a good job.
And I use that when I read papers. So, that would be
So we need to
helpful.
decide if we want to, we can still drive technology. I think technology is going to be with us for a long time. But if there's another thing, like if we wanted to do STEM, if we really wanted to go after somebody that knew STEM, or we really wanted to go after the dual immersion type or the IB, this is a chance to make really a course change or stay the course.
Okay. Ms. Pierce.
I hadn't thought of that, and I didn't know that in the past search they had made a focus. This is my first time being involved in a superintendent search. And I'd have to think about that. It seems when I look at our district, even when I came into it 25, 27 years ago, we were ahead of the game in technology even then, at even that archaic stage of things back then. We've always had been and always pushing ahead. And then I can think around at our 30-some schools, how much STEAM there is going on and how much CTE there's going on at all the different specialties at different middle schools and high schools. And it just seems like we are really well-rounded, So, I'd have to think more on that, but I can see, that it's something to talk about.
Well, and Blanche will send out my email.
Okay.
And so if you send me those thoughts, those ideas, those considerations, I will copy the rest, I'll copy the rest of the board, because I want everybody informed.
Right.
So please feel free to do that. That's going to be a confidential communication between the board and myself at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Porras.
I agree with Mr. Griffith that technology is huge, and definitely we got that with Scott, and we really have excelled with that. So, and it's just going to continue. So I think that would be a very important aspect in our search is to, to technology.
Ms. Jonathan.
I think Scott has done a wonderful job. That was one of the things that we really appreciated is that his vision for technology. And I don't think that that's going to go to the wayside, but I'm going to step aside and say we are struggling right now. We have students that have not been in school for a year and a half at one point, and then now they're back in school. We have learning loss. We have our students struggling in school, many of them, and behavior issues. But more importantly, the academics are really concerning me. On our last iReady presentation that we had, it was not as up to par like I would have expected. So I would want to look at a superintendent that would be able to realize that we're in a different situation, and this situation is not going to be going away in the next year or two. And so I want somebody that's going to be able to really help with our academics and make sure that we're really pushing our students and making sure that they either have remedial work, remedial programs, things that will be able to get them back on target and for us to be excelling as I think that we have in the past. But right now we're struggling. So I would want somebody that would be able to work around what we've been given to from COVID, as far as I said, the learning loss. So that's what I'm really looking for, is strong emphasis on academics right now, because, and I don't mean IB or AP, I'm talking in general academics, that and making sure that all of our students have the ability to go as far as they can academically, and that we're able to make sure that they're reaching their highest potential. And right now it's a scary time because of all that we have to do, and they're going to have to work magic on that LCAP and things like that to make sure that we have the programs to get the support we need.
What I'm looking for is a robust intervention program. Intervention starts K1. I need somebody who will take that technology, who will take STEM, who will take science, and actually focus on intervention, early intervention. The earlier, the better.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Anybody have anything else?
I do want to mention a concern, I mean, that all the districts are experiencing now with the shortage of
Right.
substitute teachers throughout everywhere, and the disappointment I have but it's a reality, that we have to pull our intervention teachers to be subbing in the classrooms along with administrators and other things. And so if it doesn't get improved in the next month or so, then our plan for this intervention during the year is really going to need some other boost along the way, because it's just the reality. We need people in the classroom also, but we also need to stay true to the intervention program, either make it untouchable or something like that.
Well, and there are issues that are swirling around right now in school districts
It's difficult.
that you really can't influence. And I mean, there's societal issues, there's illness issues, there's hospitalization, you're losing staff, you know, that's universal. I agree. I'll take my notes and I'll clean them up, because you couldn't read them right now. I'll shoot them to Blanche and make sure they're clean. She will send them out to you. Here's the things we talked about. And then I'll begin to put a timeline together, and I'll be back to you, but I don't have that date yet. We'll start advertising the position. As I said, I've had a couple of calls already from folks, just to let you know. Anything else that I've not talked about that you wish I had? Okay.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll turn the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Condon. Okay, the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education will be on Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 at 7 p.m. at the District Education Center Boardroom at 47950 Dune Palms Road, La Quinta, California. This meeting is adjourned at 5:43.